Hi, everybody. It's Miss Amy, and it's becoming a habit of long time no see. Well, I have a break from school, so I might actually get some more reading in now. Woohoo! I hope you all are doing good today. I'm here to bring chapter 10 of Lynn Reed Banks' Return of the Indian to you. Now remember, boys and girls, Miss Amy does not own the rights to this book. She just owns the book, and she's glad she gets to share it with you. So in our last reading, we found out that Little Bear was doing a little bit better, and Patrick was kind of holding out. He had Boone in his pocket after all. And they put Boone in that cabinet, and of course, when he was in the cabinet, he was in there boo-hooing. He's the boo-hoo cowboy. So let's go ahead and read chapter 10. It says, Boone's brainwave of the Return of the Indian. You know what I've noticed? There's not very many illustrations in this book. I think the Indian in the cupboard might have had a couple more. But anyways, let's go ahead and crack the spine and open the book. Yes, it's us all. It's us, said Patrick excitedly. He capered about, stiff-legged, unable to contain himself. Omri, too, was over the moon. It's so good to see you, Boone, he cried, wishing he could wring the little man's hand and bang him on the back. Boone, who must have fallen off his horse at some point, now yep, now scrambled to his feet and dusted himself off. The horse came up behind him in the cupboard and nudged him forcefully in the back as if to say, I'm here too. Omri could just about stroke its tiny nose with the tip of his little finger. The horse bunted it, nodding its head up and down, and then exchanged whinnies with Little Bear's pony pony on the distant seed tray. And it's mighty good to see you fellas, Boone was saying warmly as he scrambled out of the cupboard. Been more'n a minute, though, without my hallucinations. Well, why'd you know? What'd you know? If it ain't the little Injun gal. Bright Stars had taken a few steps toward him timidly. He raised his hat. Howdy, Injun lady. Hey, but where's the other one? That redskin that made me his blood brother after he'd half killed me. He looked around the top of the chest, but Little Bear's matchbox bed had its back to him. Tarnation! Take me if and I didn't miss that doggone varmint when I woke up that last time, or went back, or whatever you call it. He rubbed his shirt with reminiscently. My old pals thought I'd gone plumb loco when all tried to tell 'em how I got my wound. Are you okay now, Boone? Me? Just fine. Why, I can't kill Boo-hoo. Boone's easy, even if and he does look a mite soft. So where's Lil Bear? Let me shake the hand that shot me to show him there ain't no hard feelings. Bright Stars didn't understand much of this, but she heard Little Bear's name. She took Boone by the arm and drew him over to the bed. When Boone saw the prostrate figure of the Indian, he stopped short. Holy smokes! What happened to him? He got shot too, by a Frenchman, Omri added in a low voice, and signaled to Boone not to ask questions. But Boone was not that most tactful of a man. Jehoshaphat! Never did trust them Frenchies. Got one running our saloon. Someday, someone's gonna run him right out of town. Water's the whiskey, you know. He added confidentially to Bright Stars. At the word whiskey, Little Bear opened his eyes. He had dropped off to sleep and tried to sit up. When he saw Boone bending over him, he let out a cry of recognition, and then fell back again with his hand to his bandaged chest. Gee, the poor old savage, said Boone, shaking his head. He sniffed. Not that he probably didn't deserve it. They're all us up to no good, but all the same, I can't stand to see a man in pain. He wiped away a tear. He's much better now, said Patrick. There's nothing to start crying about. Boone blew his nose loudly and plunked himself down on the bed. Tell me the whole thing, he said. Not now, said Omri hurriedly. Why in the thunder not? I gotta hear sometime. Come on, Injun. Or are you ashamed of something you done to that Frenchie to make him take a shot at you? Little Bear lay on the bed and stared up at Boone. There was suddenly tension in the air as they all, Bright Stars too, waited for him to remember to ask. Slowly, he raised himself onto his elbows. His eyes had gone narrow, his face taut and scowling. Suddenly, he opened his eyes wide and let out a wild cry. Ah! Bright Stars put her hands to her face, turned and fled up the ramp onto the teepee. What got into her? Boone asked, looking after her puzzled. But another anguished cry transfixed them all. Little Bear, remember, soldiers come. Burn village. Burn corn. Many, many. He opened and closed his hands rapidly. Many. Holding up 10 fingers. Again and again. Iroquois braves fight, but not enough. Not got guns, horses. Enemy break, burn, steal, kill, kill. His voice cracked. He stopped speaking. Another man might have broken down and wept, but Little Bear just stared. Wide-eyed and frozen-faced, his mouth was shut in a straight line, like a knife, cut in his hard face. Only his hands quivered at his side, and his fingers became hooks. Gee whiz, fella, muttered Boone at last. That's too bad. There was a long silence. Nobody moved. Little Bear lay on his back, his eyes open. He seemed to be neither fully awake nor asleep. Omri passed a finger back and forth in front of those staring eyes. They didn't respond. Omri, Patrick, and Boone looked anxiously at each other. What shall we do? Nothing, said Boone. Poor guy's had a shock happen to me once, too. Came to after I got knocked out in some kind of ruckus. Couldn't remember a thing. Started in talking and drinking just like everything was normal. When all of a sudden, it came back to me. A lynching. A mob of coyotes just strung a fellow up for something he didn't even do. Most horriblest thing I ever saw. I just laid there, seeing it's all over again. Took me a dang long time to get over it. And that wasn't bad neither, as what's he's a saying. Now, poor critter. Tears of sympathy were streaming down the cowboy's leathery cheeks. Them rotten Frenchies mixing in sneaking up on 'em that-a-way and scaring their women folk, and all. Gee, I sure would like to help them poor folk if it hadn't happened long ago. This showed an extraordinary change of heart for Boone, who had been absolutely down on Indians when they'd first known him. Omri said, "If we sent them back now, it would be all still going on. If you wanted to help, maybe we could send you back to their time. If Little Bear just held on to you, you'd all go back together." Boone, who had had his face buried in his red bandana, froze for a moment. His eyes slowly appeared above the red spotted cloth. "Me?" he said in a quavering voice. "Well, you said you'd like to help. You've got a gun, after all. And you don't like Frenchmen. Maybe you'd like to shoot a few of them." "Before they shoot me," finished Boone. "That's a great idea. Thanks a lot. Things is tough and dangerous enough where I come from. I mean, when I come from, without going back 100 years to when things was 10 times worse. Come to that, what's stopping you from lending a hand to the Redskins if you're crazy about 'em?" Patrick and Omri looked at each other, startled. "We can't go back," Patrick exclaimed. "How could we? We can't fit into the cupboard." Boone looked at them, looked consideringly at the small bathroom cabinet. Less than a foot high, and then back to the boys again. "That's true," he said grudgingly. "I reckon I can't argue but that. But there's still a way I can think of that you could help him, if'n you'd mind to. "How?" they asked at once. "What's that down over yonder? It's danged far away. I can't say properly, but it looks to me like a whole bunch of folks laying in a heap in a box." The boys looked where he was pointing. Down on the floor was the biscuit tin full of Omri's collection of plastic figures. He'd gone up to the loft that morning to fetch it. Now he lifted it and put it on the chest, the top of which was getting rather crowded. "Lift me up and let me look," ordered the little man. Patrick put his hand down close to him. Boone heaved himself onto it as if he were scrambling onto a horse without a saddle. Patrick flew him over the box. He lay down flat and peered over the side of Patrick's hand, hanging on to that precious hat. Look, we actually do have a picture this time. Look at there's Boone and Patrick's hand. "Look at that. What you think you got down there if it ain't all kinds of men with all kinds of shooting irons? If'n you could stick them all in the cupboard and bring 'em to life and then send 'em back with the Injuns, they'd come out the other end and send them Frenchies scooting back to France as fast as grease lightning. Omri and Patrick looked at each other. Would it work? Breathed Patrick, his eyes his eyes alight. I was thinking, "Ite," but that didn't make sense, did it? Omri could see that it was not just the possibility of helping the Indians that was getting him excited. From the very beginning, Patrick had wanted to experiment with the cupboard. Omri had barely been able to prevent him from stuffing dozens of soldiers in, bringing whole armies to life, and making them fight. This looked like just the excuse he'd been wanting. The idea had a strong appeal for Omri, too, but he was more cautious. We'd have to think about it, he said. Patrick almost slammed his hand with Boone in it down again on the chest. You're always thinking, he said disgustedly. Why don't we just try it? Omri was frowning, trying to imagine. Listen. He picked up a knight in chain mail with a big helmet and a shield with a red cross on a white ground. If we put this one in, for instance, he'd come to us from the time of Richard I. He wouldn't know a thing about Indians. He'd want to go off to Palestine and kill the Saracens. He put the knight down and picked up a soldier in a flat cap and khaki shorts. This one's a French foreign legionnaire. We couldn't even talk to him, let alone to an Arab tribesman or a Russian Cossack. They were great fighters, but they wouldn't just agree to be in an army fighting Frenchmen in America on the side of the Indians. They're not toys. Every one of them's a person. I mean, if we thought them to life, we'd have to explain everything. Half of them wouldn't believe it. Others might think they'd gone crazy. But Patrick interrupted in high impatience. I'm sitting here thinking, what happened to the matron? I mean, I guess they put her back in the cupboard, but I'm like, did they? I don't remember. Probably. Okay. I bet you that sister's, though, upset and missing her. All right, anyways. Oh, what are you on about? Who's talking about soldiers with swords and axes and old-fashioned pop guns? What about these? He dug his hand into the tin and came up with a fistful of British soldiers. Some had self-loading rifles. Others had submachine guns. There was a howitzer, a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun, 3 rocket launchers, and a variety of grenades. Omri stared at the firepower bristling out between Patrick's fingers. They had an army there, all right. Patrick was already moving toward the cupboard, the handful of soldiers ready to thrust in. No, said Omri, as he had once before. Stop! I'm going to do it, said Patrick. Just at that moment they heard footsteps coming up the stairs. As one, they turned and sat on the very edge of the chest, facing the door, forming a human screen. Omri's mother put her head in. Patrick, your mother just rang. Your cousin Tamston has had a nasty fall off her bicycle, and your mother's going to stay and help your aunt. So you won't be going home today. Patrick's face lit up. Great! That means I can stay the night here. I'm sorry about your poor cousin. I'm not, said Patrick promptly. I hope she broke a leg. Really, Patrick? That's not nice. Nor is she, said Patrick, feelingly. Omri's mother was looking at them curiously. You do look odd sitting there like Tweedledum and Tweedledee, she said. Are you hiding something from me? Ooh, mother's tuition. Yes, said Omri. It was always better to be quite frank with his parents if possible. Luckily, they didn't expect to be in on everything he did. Oh well, she said. I hope it's nothing too awful. There'll be a bite of lunch in a little while. I'll call you. And she went off. Patrick slumped with relief. She's just not normal, your mum, he muttered. Mine wouldn't have rested till she'd had a good look. He brought his hand from behind his back and opened it and looked at the soldiers. The uncontrollable impulse to put them in the cupboard had subsided, but he still wanted to very badly. Omri could see that. Will he do it, boys and girls? I guess we'll have to wait until chapter 11, because that ends chapter 10 of the Return of the Indian. I like Omri's thinking. He's thinking of all the consequences that could occur if they bring back all these different soldiers. And I think that's a good idea, because before we do things, boys and girls, we should always think about what might come from doing them, how it might affect us, and how it might affect others. So Omri's got a good brain on his head, or in his head. Patrick, he's a little impulsive, but it sounds like he might stop and think for a minute. But I guess we'll have to wait until chapter 11 to see what happens next. So if you're watching this before bedtime, boys and girls, good night and sleep tight.